Oh, Trujillo, and they send me these lovely emails. I'm like, It's too late to
'89 18 JET program Q&A session. I'm Atsushi Council for PR and Cultural Affairs. First and foremost, big congratulations to all of you on being accepted into the JET program. I'm sure you are very excited to Japan, and as a result, have many things you are wondering about. So with us today are board members from the JET Alumni Association Rocky Mountain Chapter, also known as JETAA, to share information with you about the JET experience and answer any question you may have. Thank you again for joining us, and I hope you enjoy learning about the JET program. Congratulations. Thank you.
Okay, and next we'd like to get everybody kind of warmed up and loosened up a little bit with an icebreaker activity. So I'd like to introduce my colleague, Adam Lisbon. And do you want an introduction, or would you like to? You can introduce. All right. Sure. So he was an ALT in Kobe from 2004 to 2007. He's also the current president of our chapter. So take it away.
Okay. So there's going to be a lot of times on the JET program where at the last minute you'll be brought into a lesson. So we are going to play a game of bingo that you can make last minute when your teacher wants you to do a grammar point. So today's grammar point is experience. So have you done this? Have you been there? That kind of thing. Or in Japanese, あなたは何々したことがありますか? So this is a version of bingo I call yes, no bingo. So the way it works is, there's a bunch of squares here. So I'm going to go up to my classmate, Haro.
Hi, Fred.
Okay, so going from there. Have you seen the new Star Wars movie?
Yes.
Okay, so
Yes, I have.
circle. All right.
Okay, let's see here. I can't find one as an example here. Have you taught before?
No. But for the sake of example. A lot of teaching is lying.
I tried.
So, no, I haven't. X. So you need either 4 circles or 4 X's to get bingo. And when you get bingo, you go, bingo! All right? So, and if you do, I'll give you a sticker. No joke. So,
Can I help you pass this out?
yes.
The microphone.
One sec here. I also have pens for you. Another great skill to learn is how to actually hand out documents. You should explain the wave back. Oh, the wave? Yes, if you do this with your paper, it'll. Yeah. Does everybody have one?
Yeah.
You get them too. Does anybody need a pen or pencil? Okay. Send that down. Hands up. 1, 2. Send one down.
Oh, did you need it? You use chuck marks. It's totally cool. There's your pen. Here we go.
Okay. All right. So you ask one person one question, and then you move on to a new person. Okay, so Kiritsu. Rei. Okay, start.
Go dive in the mess.
Yes.
Bottom. You gotta push it. Hold it. Push and hold.
At this point, I just like. Yes.
That's fine.
Where are you at? Shiga. Okay. Where are you? Still haven't got my placement yet. We'll be fine now. Hopefully a week or two. Thank you. Have you hiked a mountain?
Hi. Answer questions. Yes, I have. That's okay. You can't be able to answer
Can you circle twice?
stickers.
Yeah, let me get a sticker.
You got a bingo?
I'm gonna cheat here and ask you if you've done JETAA before, so I can have a double bingo.
Right on, yes.
Yeah.
Double yes. Hey, it works.
Thanks, other champs.
Nice to meet you. So you're headed to Shiga. Alright, I got some good friends from there. Good.
They just keep finding me on Facebook, like people who are there. I've been there for a few years. And they're like, oh, you know, let me know if you have any questions. Or they expanded me like 6 different groups now. But I have
Once you start to make there, Who's your preference? Who's the real personality test? All right, well done.
Thanks. I just keep going around.
Yeah, do the social thing. Hey,
I'm gonna continue to talk to you.
that's all good.
Might as well.
Yeah, for sure. Feeling princessy, or we got Ninja Turtles and we got some Spider-Man. Yeah, Ninja Turtles are in short supply. That's it, I guess. Not doing more.
It's important.
Right?
Great. So inspired. Nice to meet you, Terry.
You're running out of options.
I'm very good at it.
I like these rules though. The little twist that I have.
I personally like the English grammar.
Are you still going for bingo or what's going on? All right. Well, that's good.
Why is it Charles here? Charles is another gentleman like that was.
I know it's awesome. Okay. Let me put the volume on. Oh, that's fun.
Okay, okay, everybody back to your seats. There we go. Okay, volume is on. Excellent. Yeah, so hopefully you all got to kind of meet each other a little bit, talk a little bit. I noticed there was not a lot of bingo practicing at the end, not a lot of grammar practice happening. But this is an example of an activity that you can kind of do really last minute. And one thing I'll plug too is that JET has changed a lot and there's a lot more support and the internet is a bit more fleshed out these days. But the AJET website has a lot of stuff on it. So AJET is Association of Jets. So I highly recommend that you check that site out. They have teaching materials, lesson plan materials, all of that kind of thing. So for those of you that don't have a lot of teaching experience, that's one of those resources that's readily available to you to like, oh, what activity are we doing today? There's a crazy version of Battleship you can play with English grammar that exists. There's all these kinds of quick, easy to do activities. So I hope that this kind of gives you an idea of how you can do it. And what's cool about this bingo sheet, you'll notice there's a URL. You just type in all of the squares and all of the bingo sheets become randomized automatically for you. So it's a super handy tool when you need something last minute. Any questions about these kinds of activities? All right, well then, we're finished a little early, but I think we'll keep moving along because I know we'll have a lot more questions later.
Thanks, Adam. Now we're doing just fine on the timing. Okay, so I'd like to move to the first presentation of the day. And I'd like to introduce Van Milton. He was a junior high school and elementary school ALT in Okayama from 2008 to 2013. I'm going to pass it over to him.
Cool. Hey guys, good morning. Joe, quick logistics question. The
Sure.
live feed, is there a camera on us or is it just the screen?
Just the screen.
Okay, got it.
And let me.
Are we checking questions from people?
So it's having huge connection issues, so we may not get any, but.
Got it. Okay, I'll use the microphone and hope for the best. So, quick explanation. This is a really handy
Nope, it's
thing
not
that I
the one.
figured
It's
out.
already out.
You guys take
Yeah,
the
I was
left
just clicking
arm
down here, but.
and kind of hold it. You can make the shape of Japan, and it's really helpful for showing people where you
No,
are.
no, no. Yeah.
So fortunately, everybody has a left arm here, so this works well.
Thanks.
But yeah, basically, if Tokyo is kind of up here, Kyoto, Osaka, Hiroshima would be here. I was kind of right in the middle of Western Japan. That's Okayama. Its biggest claim to fame for a long time is it has a Shinkansen stop. Yay! So people are really humbled, and they all talk about how Inaka is how countryside and rural. But it actually turned out to be fantastic. It's a beautiful area, and when you start getting into sort of the pride of what people are really passionate about in small towns and communities, it's amazing. Japan is just in endless wealth. So my area was really famous for blue jeans and indigo dyeing. It's apparently one of the top producers of like the top level of blue jean materials in the world. Didn't know that. Also, there's a certain kind of pottery called bizen yaki, which is one of, I guess, the top styles in the world. So Japan has 7 major styles. This is one of them. Absolutely gorgeous. So the little things make a big difference when you're there. All right, so the topic of my talk is going to be about JTE relations. JTE is your Japan Teacher of English. So this is going to be the main interaction you're going to have as a teacher is going to be your JTEs. Some of you will have one, some of you may have dozens. In my time in Japan, I think I ended up teaching at 8 different schools. So I had at least one JTE at every school, probably 2 or 3 at a couple others. So dozens throughout the time, and you've got as many types of relationships there as you have types of people. Some are great, and they just flow, and some you're like, why am I with this person? Why don't they get it? So you are gonna have to be adaptable in working with them and kind of finding a strategy that works. And it's always a little bit of give and take. So I just kind of wanted to walk through the basics and fit them.
Do you want to control it? I don't know what's the best system
I'll
here.
try to work with the animations, and we'll see how that plays
Okay.
out. So go ahead. It's just supposed to be the points. Oh god, it's gonna be slow. All right, you can just put all
It's-
this up.
Okay.
I was kind of hoping it would like auto cascade.
We'll work it out.
Yeah. All right. So this is kind of what I want to cover here. So the lesson prep. What's the ideal version of it versus what are some actual pitfalls you are likely to encounter? What are some warning signs that things are maybe not going quite right? How to identify frustration, how to get your head around it and deal with it, and then hopefully how to make things better and fix those. Yay, that was 8 years ago now. So this is, the dream. You're up, you're co-teaching with your Japanese partner, you're engaging the students, they're paying attention to the lesson, everybody's happy, this is the dream, right? So keep that image in mind, that's where you want to get to.
I misread the signal there. All right.
And you can just pull all these
I
points
will.
up.
I will.
Cool, thanks. All right, so this is kind of the ideal situation, right? And I'm just gonna be pulling points from here, but yeah, ideally your JT is setting out clear roles for you. They're gonna give you sort of a defined task. So a really good example is your JT will say, hey, I'd like you to take care of the warm-up activities. Can you create a 15-minute game or activity for the start of English class? That's perfect. That's what you want. You've got a defined job. You know how long it's supposed to take. Ideally, they're going to give you the grammar points that the kids are working on or the vocabulary. And so you kind of know what your role is. And you build something around that. That's perfect. If you find yourself in that situation, be happy. That's a good place to be. If you've got a teacher you get along with great, things are casual, you can talk to them, you can, sit next to them at a desk. Again, perfect situation. And usually when you have that, it kind of naturally flows to the students. They're going to notice that you've got good chemistry, they're going to be pretty engaged in the lesson, and that's the ideal. All right, so what are some actual situations you may find yourself in? Oftentimes, it's not perfect, so teachers are busy. How many people have a teaching background or some experience in it? Okay, so a number of you. I had none when I went over. I studied biology. I thought I knew how to deal with kids. It's one thing to deal with 2 kids that might be related to you and younger. It's different when you have 40 people staring at you and you're the sole focus of their attention. So yeah, you're gonna find that a lot of times the lesson preparation is rushed. My favorite is, hey, I need you to make a lesson about this by 4 o'clock. Please make a lesson about sports. Yes, our lesson has changed to 4 o'clock. Go. And you're just like, but I made this whole other lesson last night, can't we just do the thing? I made the thing. And a lot of times what this turns into is that the entire lesson becomes sort of a worksheet or a translation exercise, and you will just see the kids melt from boredom, and they're just sitting there listening to you, kind of filling in the little spaces. If you have to explain the lesson to your JTE on the way to the classroom, and you're like, hey, so I need you to do X, X, and X, and your JTE is like, okay, I kind of get it. Great, all right, let's go. It leads to some pretty tense moments. It's hard for you, it's hard for them. Go for it. So I think it's really good to know what the warning signs are, that things are starting to go a little bit off the rails. So if your JT is struggling to understand their role or what they're supposed to do, whether because of time or because it's a little unclear, if their only role in the lesson is to translate. If you're standing there at the board explaining something and they're turning around and explaining it to the class word for word, that's not really a good use of the co-teaching skills. With translation in that situation, it really spaces out time. So if you've worked really hard to create a lesson and you're like, okay, this is gonna fit perfectly like a 45-minute block, but then it takes twice as long because everything has to be translated, your lesson timing is gone. Frequently, you might not know where your students' vocab levels are at. And so if you are using words that are too hard, or they haven't learned yet, again, that's gonna be something the teacher has to explain to the class and give them that explanation before they can move on with the lesson explanation. And you'll see it in the kids' faces. A lot of them will be just completely bored. And I think you need to take that to heart as a teacher because ideally you're trying to engage them, right? You really want that feedback and that engagement and you want to make it exciting for them. I always found my biggest warning sign is if I was starting to speak really fast. If I caught myself kind of trying to explain quickly and talking faster and faster, that was when I realized I'm like, okay, I haven't done a good job with the preparation. I'm getting nervous in front of the students, like time to slow it down, take it a little bit easier. Another point I'll point out is that culturally, we tend to add more explanation. So if you try to explain something, somebody doesn't quite get it, we try to chime in with another explanation or another way of seeing things. This does not work well in an English second language situation because you're just adding more talking. What you actually need to do is the reverse. You need to slow it down and use simple, very concise explanations and consciously think about the definition you're giving. So try to mute that sort of instinctual response. Be like, okay, what I meant is blah, 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 blah. Don't do that. Try to slow it down, give a simple, easy explanation. Even if it's not the whole picture, it's going to be better because they have to understand it and process it.
You want all of them?
Yeah,
Okay.
just all of them. All right. So when you guys are in a tense situation, really what tends to happen is the blame game starts. You know, whose fault is it? Is it the JTE that didn't give you enough warning? Is it your fault? You didn't prepare the vocabulary that they asked for quite right? You know, you're just gonna start to feel a little tension with your JTE. And a lot of that is gonna be due to the background expectations that are in this relationship. So one of those is that you have training, you have experience, you should know how to do this. I mean, the last ALT that was in that position, they did these lessons great. I mean, didn't you all get training on how to do a perfect lesson, right? So they don't really know on our side what that training is or what level we're coming in at, who's had teacher training, who hasn't. So the expectation is, you know, maybe you're gonna be just like the last ALT that they worked with, who was there for 4 years and knew the materials in and out. You know, that they're super busy, but you have free time. Like, why can't you take more of a leading role and write more lessons? You know, you might be feeling, well, it's your job as the Japanese teacher to lead. You know, tell me what to do, tell me what to put together. You know, why aren't you giving me more instruction? There's also a little bit of perceived inequality. So Japanese teacher salaries actually are lower than the JET salary. So you might not hear this for a while. It kind of simmers in the background sometimes, but it was a conversation I had a couple times where new teachers were like, I just did 4 years of school and you're making more money than I am and you don't necessarily know how to teach it. So there's a little bit of a rub there. I will say that it quickly changes. So by 2 years in, they also get a bonus and that quickly goes above the JET salary, but it doesn't start there. And one point of frustration that I hit a lot is that because many of you might not have full Japanese language skills yet, you don't really know what's coming. So you don't know, is there a sports festival in 2 weeks? Is there a national holiday during, you know, your lesson time? That ability not to be able to see what's coming more than like what your JTE tells you can be really frustrating. So you've got, you know, maybe a 6-lesson plan, you're gonna walk them through some vocabulary, and the teacher says, oh, actually, we're only doing 3 lessons together, these 2 are holidays, and that one, they have a test day. So automatically, half the stuff that you spend time working on is gone, and believe me, it's frustrating. All right, so I wanna say, like, the best thing you can do, take a step back from it, look at it from the other side, kind of make them human again, don't just kind of get into that blame game so deep, you're like, well, you should have done X. I really like this quote. I think it just kind of helps keep things in check because there's a lot going on the other side of the equation too. And I'm going to kind of give you a little peek behind the curtain so you've got some thoughts on that. All right, so your JTE is not just an English teacher. The Japanese school system is incredibly multi-layered. There's a lot going on. Most teachers, especially the JTEs that you guys are going to have at first, are going to be the young teachers that are just out of school, that they're kind of assigned to you as the ALT. So for the most part, not always, they tend to be younger, and because of that, as sort of the kohai, as the younger sort of trainee teachers, they're also going to be given other duties at the school. A lot of that is either being a sports coach or the manager of a club. So as soon as they've finished, like an 8-hour day, they go put on some sports clothes and they do 2 more hours of like baseball practice every day. There are office responsibilities that you may not even see or hear about, but they might be like the tanto, the leader of their year, the first-year teachers, second-year teachers, or they might be put in charge of like a particular party or a sports festival. So in addition to all the teaching, they also have to coordinate with other teachers and make arrangements and do all this other stuff, and that's just on top of normal teaching duties. Japanese people don't really talk about their personal lives much, so you don't really know what's going on behind the scenes. Do they have a family? I had teachers I didn't even know were married and had like 2 kids for 2 years. And I was like, wait, what? So, do they have a family? Are they dating someone? What's going on emotionally for them behind the scenes? What's their personal life? You don't know that. You probably won't get to see it for maybe a couple years until you get to befriend people, and they might open up a little bit. So keep in mind that you're struggling behind the scenes, but they might be too. And then the last point is that you're going to be usually assigned to a JTE. Keep in mind that everything they're helping you with, from apartment setup to getting your resident card to everything else, is in addition to all of this other stuff. So if they look a little stressed out sometimes, throw them a bone. Just keep in mind, it's a busy job. So that's the main thing. Just have a little bit of compassion for your partners as you guys are working. How do you fix things? All right, first of all, use the appropriate tool for the job. If you find yourself struggling and wasting a lot of time, step back, reassess the situation, see if you can apply a little more leverage to it. Can you go back one? Thanks.
There we go.
All right, so problems that you can fix. Fatigue, I don't know if you guys are great sleepers or are very good about a schedule. And I get a show of hands who's not. But I don't really totally feel like an adult sometimes. I'm like, yeah, 4 hours of sleep, that's totally good. But keep in mind that fatigue affects your ability to deal with everything else. And so, you can deal with a lot of problems by just getting some sleep and getting your head back together. Dealing with frustration in Japan. So this is something I didn't really think about until I was there, but you probably have some hobbies or some good friends that you use to blow off steam here. For me, it's like if I'm having a rough day at work, I'll call a friend and I'll be like, do you want to go get a beer? Cool. And then, we'll gripe for a couple minutes and then talk about other stuff. And it's great to have friends you can do that with. You get to Japan, that whole support network is gone. And you may have 1 or 2 people that you meet on Jet, but it takes a while to rebuild that, usually on the order of months. Like for me, it took about 6 months until I had like a group of friends that I felt comfortable like, hey, you want to hang out on Friday? So you lose that support, you kind of lose that outlet. If you have a hobby, it's good to start thinking about it now. Like, if you do art, take some art supplies. If you run, take your shoes. Think about your outlet for stress and make sure it's in place when you get to Japan. Time management on both sides. You're going to have to work on your time management if it's not something you're good at and kind of upping your game with that. But then also, there's kind of the meta time management where if your JTE isn't good or is simply too busy, you're going to kind of have to take that into effect and just plan around. So time management is one of those ongoing life things. No matter how good you are at it, you can always improve. So kind of good to get those strategies going. Lack of criticism was a huge one for me. So not having a background in teaching, I had no feedback on my lessons. Are these good? Are the kids liking them? Could I do better? What do your lessons look like? I didn't know, and there wasn't a chance to talk with other ALTs except twice a year. So what I started doing was putting stuff on Facebook, asking friends. I'm like, what does your sports lesson look like? How does your bingo game work? Where did you pull that from? So that comparison can help you sort of benchmark a lot. If you need to like up your game, get better materials, or if you're killing it and you're doing great, other people can learn from you. So seek out the feedback, it's important. You typically won't get it from your Japanese JTEs. They are very hesitant to give criticism, even if it's well-meaning, even if it would help you, it's really seen as a negative there. So if you even ask your teachers directly, like, how is this lesson? They'll be like, oh, it's great, it's fine. It's always fine. A big point is if you're getting a little testy, if problems are coming up, I think as Americans, our #1 response is sarcasm. We use it for everything. We apply it liberally to like every situation. It does not fly in Japan. It's seen as incredibly abrasive and kind of cruel. And you'll notice quickly the Japanese people do not use sarcasm. And if you find yourself making a lot of jokes that are sarcastic, you might start hearing like, aha, American joke. And I got there and I was like, literally, I was like, yeah, it is actually an American joke, isn't it? But then I kind of found out that that has the context of you're kind of being an asshole. Like, don't use that kind of humor. And if you find yourself kind of in frictional situations with people, pay attention. Are you using a lot of sarcasm, and can you just dial that down? It'll go a long way. Something else, if you start feeling sorry for yourself, I did. I was super rural, and I was in the middle of nowhere, and I was like, oh man, I'm the most northern jet, I'm an hour away from anyone else, like, boo-hoo, poor me, I can't talk to people, I can't, get feedback on my lessons. The one thing you can fix that with, do things for other people, right? Don't focus on yourself. You'll get into a dark, dark place that way, but be like, what can I do that engages other people, whether it's students, other ALTs. I set up a charity bike ride. It was super fun, and it gave me something to concentrate on. So offer that up, see what you can add. All right, and then especially important is just if you're in a hole, try to reframe the problem. Look at it in a way that you can make progress on, not just sort of be stuck in the same position. Think about the things you don't know. So a lot of times you'll be frustrated trying to put together a lesson. Think about specifically what are the aspects of the lesson that are making it hard to build. Students' vocabulary levels and like what words they have learned and haven't learned, that's pretty important. A lot of classes will use specific books. So if you can get those books, make sure you've got them, you're reading up, and maybe see about the book before. It'll give you a good sense for what grammar points they've learned. Are they at this simple self-introduction? Hello, my name is so-and-so. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you too, right? It's hard to like jump to philosophical points from there. So figure out where the students are at. Ask the questions. This is the area your JTEs are gonna be most useful. They've been studying this for 4 years in college. They've probably taught a lot of lessons. Ask them. Figure out where the students are at. And then also remember to listen. So this is something we do as Americans. We tend to overpower, not intentionally. We're not like, I want you to listen to my opinion, but we try to suggest and add more. Like, what if we did this? What if we did this? The problem is we're really good at like coming up with those what ifs, but we're really bad at listening. And especially in Japan, people are very soft-spoken and understated. And sometimes you just kind of have to like let there be silence until your JTE offers a suggestion or an idea. Don't be afraid of that. Embrace it. Kind of give them some space and some time to suggest. You'll be impressed by how smart they are, by how much they know, and it will really help. But you have to allow that to come into the conversation. And then Adam touched on this, and I really want to bring this up as a major point, especially for people who don't have a teaching background. Find out where to get resources. Don't reinvent the wheel. Somebody asks you to make a bingo game, don't sit there, draw out the squares and like come up with the questions and then randomize them yourself on every board. There's a resource for that. He just gave you the link to it. So the ALT and ESL teaching thing has been a worldwide phenomenon for like, I don't know, decades. So all of this is on the internet. There are books about teaching strategies, games, like 5-minute games that you can pick up and use in a classroom with minimal preparation. Go get those resources, look up ESL websites, find out where to get those materials and how to adapt. You'll save a lot of time adapting something that's like 75% of the way there than generating something from scratch and driving yourself crazy when it doesn't work because the kids don't understand the rules. So look for resources first, talk to ALTs that have been around longer, see what they use, and kind of get a resource pool of those things. So the AJET website is really good. They started adding lessons on there. There's probably 10 others that I just had quick links to. Somebody would say, hey, we need a lesson on this grammar point. Great. Search, pull out 3, look at them. Which is the best? Can I use that one? No, I've got to change the grammar points. Great. 15 minutes as opposed to 2 hours. Perfect. All right. And my number 1 tip for how to teach well, use games. And this took me probably my entire time in Japan, but they are fantastic for several reasons. You're taking the focus off of yourself. So what you'll notice in probably your first couple of lessons, you're standing in front of a room of 40 people. Everyone is looking at you. They're hanging on every little word and thing you're pointing at. They're taking in what are your clothes, what are your glasses like, your hair, it's just an intense amount of focus. Games are great because instead of focusing on you, everyone is suddenly focused on a task, right? So it takes the heat off of you, it gives them a goal, it has a concise set of rules. This is an example of Scrabble, which I'm sure you guys know. I love this game. I was using it in one of my very high-level English schools, and they thought it was fantastic, but I didn't have a lesson prepped for one of my lower-level schools. And I thought, hey, I'll just try this one day. If it totally tanks, we won't do it again. And this was a very entry-level school. They went nuts because it was a challenge. So they have all their English dictionaries out. We explain the rules, how do you put the letters together, what are the words, and all I had to do was go around and check that the words were actual words, that they were playing accordingly, and they got it. It just went. And both the teacher and I were astonished. They started asking for this, and we had like a once-a-month Scrabble game. So yeah, games are fantastic, and you can gamify anything. All right, so endpoint. If you do get down, if you're having a rough spot, remember why you guys went to Japan, right? Definitely the teaching's a part of it, but you're all going there to explore, to have fun, get around, see cool things. Don't lose that focus. Don't let kind of the weight of the job weigh you down at any point. If you need to break away and do cool stuff, definitely get out there and do it. Put out the energy you want to receive. If you've got a rough teacher situation, and I definitely did, there was one in particular where the teacher actually called in the vice principal and was saying, look, this guy's such a terrible teacher, he needs to go. And she had a 5-year ALT right before me who spoke fluent Japanese, and I walked in with no experience. So I'm sure it was a big contrast. But at the end of my 5 years with her, we actually were best friends. And basically the thinking was, what do I want to receive from her? Put that energy out there, you'll get it back. It might take some time, you have to invest, but it's worth it. When you're dealing with your JTs, be assertive, but don't overpower. It's really easy to overpower just from our natural way of interacting as Americans. Again, create some listening space and make sure you're listening to their opinion. And lastly, if your students are having fun, you're doing it right. Use that as your barometer. If you've got a bunch of blank faces in a room, really consider doing a game, something to switch it up. Everyone's smiling and engaged, congratulations, gold star. That's the game. That's the whole goal of the project. All right, that is everything I got.
Okay, thanks, Van. Coming up next, I'd like to introduce Terry Galvez. She was an elementary and junior high school ALT in Iwamizawa, Hokkaido, from 2016 to 2017. And she's also currently on the board of JETAA Rocky Mountain as our events coordinator. So here we go, and get your PowerPoint up.
All right, thank you. Well, hi everyone. You already did my intro, so that's great. Is anyone going to Hokkaido? No? Oh, well, I hope you visit it. It's really beautiful. All right.
Should be
That one.
that one.
No,
Thank
wait.
you. Are you sure?
No, it's supposed to be Culture Shock and Jetsport. That's Taylor's old one.
Uh-oh.
It's coming out of.
All right, stall for time.
Sing a song. Ah, no!
Questions from the last presentation?
Does anyone have questions for Van about JT relationships and all that good stuff? No?
You feel like until you get in there, you
Right.
don't really know what's coming.
And it does seem like some of you have located this, but there is on the second sheet of the handout, there is room for notes and writing questions to save for our kind of open question period that we'll have later in the morning.
Here, in the top.
Just to point that out, so I didn't walk through that, sorry.
Culture shock that.
I might say, does
Oh, no,
anyone on
last
the panel over here, does anyone have like a example situation of like a JTE interaction that didn't go super smooth? One way to fix it?
Okay, we'll just do it from this.
Are we up already?
We're up.
Okay. Alright.
I didn't really stall, I'm sorry. I panicked, that's what I did. So lesson learned, try not to panic when you're teaching in front of your class, because then they'll panic and they won't know what you're doing.
The same thing will happen to you.
Yes, it will happen to you, because there will be a day, like Van said, where they just come at you, do this, and it's due in like 2 hours. And you only have maybe an hour before your first class to present. But I'm not presenting about that. I'm presenting about culture shock and Jet Support Network. So culture shock, what is it? Okay, so it is the feeling of disorientation experienced by someone who is suddenly subjected to an unfamiliar culture, way of life, or set of attitudes. So I have this graph line thing.
We gotta get our
Yes.
gestures down.
I have this graph line thing that shows kind of how it will feel. You'll start at the honeymoon phase where everything's great, food is awesome, everything's shiny and exciting, it's all good. But then you might start to sink into a rejection phase where things are really overwhelming and you get really upset about the littlest things, like the bathrooms don't have paper towels and some of them don't have the blow dryers and I forgot my hand towel at home, so I have to walk out with wet hands. Or there's no trash cans in public spaces, so I have to carry my trash around with me for like 3 kilometers or whatever. So, yes, but as you get through that, you might sink into another phase, the regression phase, where you only want to be around familiar things, things that remind you of home. So maybe you'll only eat Pizza Hut and McDonald's and KFC for like a really long time because you have to eat Japanese food for lunch every single day and you get sick of it. That will happen. Not an example of my life, but slowly and hopefully you will reach the recovery phase where things will normalize and you start to get used to being in Japan. I hope you get to this point. Some people don't and they quit early, so I really implore that you try and push through rejection and regression because it's going to be so much better once you're actually used to living in Japan and then you can really enjoy being there. There's also a thing called reverse culture shock, which is when you get so used to being in Japan or whatever place you're in, like everything is paid for in cash, you can walk 5 to 10 minutes anywhere, and then you come back to America where cash is for tipping and you don't remember how much you're supposed to tip, or you have to drive everywhere because you literally can't walk anywhere. So yeah, a bunch of signs that you're experiencing culture shock, like mood swings, vulnerability and irrational anger are kind of like the bigger ticket items of what you might feel. The need to get away is also very common, but there's a bunch of ways to deal with your culture shock. So the first is just to be aware of your emotions and your feelings and accept that change is difficult. And it's going to be a little bit difficult in general for the first couple months that you're there. Get a hobby, join a club, join a sport. If you don't know how to do that, you can ask your teacher or the BOE because they really want you to be engaged in your community and they will very happily suggest a dojo or a community center where you can be involved. Keep in touch with your friends and family. You don't have to isolate yourself from America just because you're now moving to Japan. Japan has Wi-Fi almost everywhere, so you really have no excuse not to call your mom, so do it. Make new friends, so this is not just within your town, make friends with other Jets in your prefecture or across Japan, and also make friends with the locals, because they really also want to get to know you. You're gonna be famous when you get into your town, because you're gonna be in like the newspaper within the first couple of weeks. So they want to know you, and when they see you, they're gonna be so impressed and so excited. So definitely try to get to know them. You should also try and get to know the current Jets in your town. There's always this weird barrier between kohais and senpais. and try and break that down because they know where the cheapest bars are. They know how to navigate your town, so they're always really helpful. Growth doesn't always feel good. It'll suck, but but you'll get used to it and you'll accept it, hopefully. And then, like Van said, remember why you went to Japan. It should really be a driving force for you to stay and experience more of it. So yeah, if you know what's coming, it makes it a lot easier to accept your surroundings. So within the first couple days of you living in your town, you will meet your supervisors. This is the Board of Education and your principals and your supervisors. I took 2 days for me to meet all 4 of my school's supervisors because I had 4 schools. You might not just have one. And it is something. You should also be aware that you should bring souvenirs to your schools for all of your staff. And if you can't afford all your staff, because you might have 12 schools and that's like, 500 people you need to buy omiyage for, you could just buy for your supervisors. And you should always make your supervisors' souvenirs better because they're your supervisors. So I bought tea for all of my schools, which is pretty cheap, but it's Colorado tea. And then I also got mints and hats for my supervisors who will never wear those hats because what old Japanese man will wear a baseball cap from America? Residence handover. I don't know if anyone's going to Tokyo. Is anyone going to Tokyo? Okay, you won't have this problem. You won't have you won't have the problem of having to find your own home because if you're going to Tokyo, you'll likely have to get a new place. But you will inherit an apartment or a house, and you will likely inherit the junk that comes with it. So try and contact your predecessor if you can. Talk to them about what they have, if you want to keep anything of theirs, and what the residence that you'll be taking over is like. Because you never know if you'll end up in a shoebox, or maybe you'll end up in a house with 3 bedrooms, all by yourself. School events. School in general has already been in session for about 4 to 5 months by the time you arrive there. So it's good to keep in mind, you're not starting from the beginning with your students, you are continuing your predecessor's lessons, which is a little bit difficult because they have a totally different teaching style than you. And your JTEs might not, understand that. So just keep in mind that you have to kind of go with the flow for a little bit. But school events is also something that's taking place around the time you arrive. They're preparing for summer festival and sports day, and all the teachers will be very, very busy, so they might not have time to help you. Don't take it offensively, because this is a big setup. But I do suggest you attend these, because they're great, and the kids work so hard to prepare for it. Lastly is the welcome speech that you will have to present. If you could prevent it, I'm sure you would. No, you have to present it in front of your whole school, to all of your schools, just a brief introduction about yourself. If you're going to do it in English, do it slowly. You also have to make a self-introduction class. And this is kind of a very stressful part of your career, the beginning of your career. So long as you prepare it ahead of time, you'll be fine. Your self-introduction can go a little bit like this. I think I should do it because the timing will be better because I know it. Do you click this one?
Yes.
Okay, so my name is Terry, like teriyaki. I'm 26 years old, or in Japanese, it's 26. Only those who can speak it can understand that joke. I'm from Colorado, home of the Rockies. My hobby is art. I really like anime, and it's very nice to meet you. So you can do something like this. It doesn't have to be a PowerPoint presentation. It should be much more than this, of course. Expand more about where you're from because they really want to know more about the place you're coming from. Expand on your interests so that they can talk to you, your students can get to know you better. But yeah, it could be something fun like this. You can actually make physical boards that they can see and touch. But yeah, these are suggestions. This is a suggestion for your self-introduction class. And you should always come up with activities to go with it. So like a game about yourself. After that though, we're going to talk about the JET support network. I taught English in Japan. I could totally talk in front of people. So moving to Japan is a bit difficult, yes. And sometimes you won't know how to deal with it. And you have a bunch of resources available to you though. So the prefectural advisor is someone who runs the JET program out of your prefecture. You will likely meet them at Tokyo orientation. They will be taking you to your prefecture after orientation is finished. There are 3 types of PAs. There's the Japanese civil servant. They are the ones who sort of decide your placement. They're also the ones who talk directly with your supervisors if you're having work issues, so they're good to go to for that. CIRs are coordinators of international relations. They're good for communication issues between your BOE and your work. And then ALTPAs are, they're ALTs. They have teaching and classroom experience, so if you need help figuring out how to run your classroom or need tips for it, they're really good to go to. PAs in general are very good for work issues, but they're not your boss. So they should be kind of the last resort. If you have a work issue, you should always discuss it with your supervisor or principal first and try and work it out with them. And then if you can't, take your supervisor and principal with you to the PA. If you go by yourself to a PA and then they talk to your principal and your principal didn't know you were having a work issue, it's gonna get really awkward and they're gonna get hurt. So always good rule of thumb, talk to your supervisor first.